NRL fantasy team reveals. Everyone's been asking for it, so I'm ready to go. I'm ready to share my roster. Welcome back, guys. I'm Longy, former overall NRL fantasy champ, and currently with the Casual Athlete here with Biz. How you doing, mate?
Mate, I love a good team reveal, and I'm excited to go through your team. I know that the people everywhere around the world have been waiting eagerly for this. I've had a few sneak peeks over the last few weeks. The podcast about this is look, I'm loving the team. I'm loving the pod options, and I'm excited to go through it.
Yeah, it's hot property. So let me talk through my strategy here. We're going to start from the top at hooker, work our way down, jump across to the bench. I'll go through loopholes here as well. So first up, Harry Grant at hooker. Now, I'm rejecting the idea that we shouldn't invest at hooker. I'm happy to have Harry Grant and then Connor Watson at that mid spot who can slide into hooker as well, along with support from Peter Marmazelis on the bench. So I think Harry Grant is about 10 points undervalued right now. I think we see him return back to his best, and I think he's going to be the best hooker in fantasy by a big margin. In terms of the middle forwards here, I've gone a bit lighter. I've rejected Isaiah Yeo. I just don't think it's worth spending the money to have both Isaiah Yeo and Nathan Cleary. So my view there is pick the one you're going to captain. Don't pick the other one. And I've gone Cleary firm and strong, so I'm not getting Isaiah Yeo there. Save due to money, Terrell May, Connor Watson, they're safe guys. And then Tallis Duncan's a guy who, if he starts at lock, he's value. If he doesn't start at lock, he won't be in my team. We'll roll down to the edge spots here. So Hosking and Gus Crichton. I think this is a massive upside play. And it's two guys that are technically pods right now, may not stay pods. Now, there are some risks with these guys, but I think they're both guys who can pump out 90 points on their day. So that's what I'm looking for from my edge back rowers with a solid base, with a good work rate. I do have to cop a bit of an injury risk with Zach Hosking and maybe a bit of a minutes risk, but at 582K, I think he's worth it. The halves pairing, I don't really need to talk about. Everyone's on Cleary and Metcalf, so I'm just going to leave that and let that slide through. Centers, Jack Bird, Dylan Lucas. The trial game really swayed me. So Dylan Lucas was fantastic. And the thing with Dylan Lucas is it's not just a forward you can play at center. It's a forward you can play at center who also has bulk attacking upside because he's one of the best line runners in the game. And he's running off Kalen Ponga's hip. So excited about him. And then wing fullback before I invite some feedback here. Jaden Campbell, Isaiah Yongi, Greg Mazu. Again, I'm sort of going for a bit of value here. So Jaden Campbell's a guy who I saw enough kicking from him in the trial games. I like the goal kicking. I like the Titans attack. I think he's going to be good. Isaiah Yongi, must have. Everyone's got him. And Greg Mazu, again, I'm back in that Newcastle left edge with Lucas, Best, Mazu. And I think Mazu is going to fall over the line from some easy tries. And he also had some great running stats in that last game. So that's the starting team. In fact, I'm going to keep rolling here. I'll cover the bench and then we'll get into a bit of a Q&A. So bench here, we've got Hetherington, 37 tackles, 0 misses in that trial game. I like that. I like the role at lock. And we've seen Madge turn guys into genuine fantasy producers at lock, like Offa Hangawi in the past at the Tigers. So I think Hetherington's going to get that role. Mama Zealous, the fantasy production is too good. I'm ignoring the job security risk, but you have to have him. Duffy and Sandon Smith, base price guys who should score reasonably well. I'm more confident in Duffy than I am in Sandon. And then on the emergency spots, I got 2 loophole guys. So Jack Cole can loophole in and Tamale can also loophole in. Now, the way I manage that is if Tamale scores well, I leave Jaden Campbell in my starting side and Tamale is my top wing fullback on my bench. So it means that he will automatically sub in to that wing fullback spot in the starting side. Jack Cole is above Tamale, so he is the auto emergency for my bench. So if Jack Cole scores really well, Tamale scores poorly, I might go and buy a wing fullback and potentially look to move Jaden Campbell up into that interchange spot instead and take Jack Cole's score, not take Tamale's score, and play someone else in the starting side. Then at the bottom there, I've gone for some upside plays here. So Toya, Kautunga. I'm not obsessed with getting the cash cows right away. I think Teamless Tuesday next week is going to tell us a lot. So they're placeholders right now, but we'll see how that sort of plays out. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the side. I think I've got enough cover across the board. So the hooker cover is there. The forward cover is there with Hetherington. He covers the middle spot. And then the other cover is Dylan Lucas coming up to edge if I need to via center. Halves cover is there. Wing fullback, I've got a bit of cover there as well. And I do need to have that cover because I do have a couple of nights. So we're going to have a buy early and obviously Jaden Campbell too. So that's my roster, 5K in the bank. It's looking pretty solid for this week. It'll change a lot before round 1, but that's where it sits, Biz.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I think it's obvious that you've put a lot of thought into it, well balanced. You love the loophole strategy, gives you a lot of flexibility into next week. I think the key things here are you've locked in players who have a lot of upside this week, but you've given yourself the flexibility to move if things don't work out next week. And I think that's the main thing. I think people have to just consider that. Remember that it's only that your Vegas players get locked this week. So make sure that you have the room to move if things don't pan out as planned. If team lists next week don't look like what you're expecting them to, because there's always a world where what you're thinking will be named next week is not named. So just make sure you're considering that. But, my first thoughts on the team is I love the kind of differences you've made, like versus other teams, like Harry Grant up front. I think every year that he's played 80 plus minutes at hooker, he's averaged 60 plus. He's priced in the low 50s this year. I think people are sleeping on him, just given that everyone's on Connor Watson. Connor Watson, I think he played 80 minutes at hooker in the finals last year, but in the preseason games, he hasn't scored that well. I think, 40 odd in the All Stars game and 40 odd against the Knights. He didn't play big minutes against the Knights. He played 50 odd minutes. So you have to back him to get 80. So I think that's a great strategy. You've obviously got Watson as well. So if he pans out, great. But we've always both historically been fans of the Harry Grant and Watson style dual hooker combination. Like hookers, other than last year, generally tend to be some of the best scoring options. So I'm loving that. A bit of critique or questions on your team. I don't want to say critique because I do love this team. I think it's very well thought of, and I've had pretty much every player here in my squad at some point. But I want to run some questions, and I want to hear your views on things. I think Grant's an obvious one that easy to explain, but Tallis Duncan, walk us through the process on how you picked him. Are you not worried that his minutes versus when he starts at the edge are lower at lock, and kind of underwhelming stats playing in the middle in Reggies last year?
My thinking here is that the Cam Murray injury is long term, so they're not going to band aid a solution together, and they're going to look for a long term solution. And my thinking there is that Tallis Duncan is that long term solution for them. So I just reckon there was enough chances last year where he could have locked in an edge spot, and they didn't seem to preference him for that role. They seem to view him as a middle, so I think he's going to get that middle role this year. If he's not named to start round one, I have no interest in playing bench roulette with him. I don't think he's good enough to do any of that sort of thing, especially at 451k. But as a starting lock, even if he gets 60 odd minutes, pumps out some pretty good scores, has some big attacking upside games, that's what's going to really spike his price. I think he can be a valuable contributor. The other options in that price range, I could free up some cash and potentially go for someone at that 500k price point. I just don't think someone like Thomas Gilbert is much better than Duncan, and it costs me money to go get him. I could maybe free up some money and go for Horsburgh, but it's 100k I've got to find somewhere. I like Horsburgh more than I like Duncan, but not enough to tear my team apart and find 100k. So as it stands, it's balanced. Duncan's one I'm not holding on to super tightly, but if he's a starting lock, he probably will be in my side.
Yeah, I agree with the logic there. So you're not too worried about Kolomatangi potentially playing lock, and rumors about Fletcher and Hubner and Jai Arrow even playing lock. You're fairly certain that if he's named at lock, they're going to look to the future, given Murray's out, and keep him there for an extended span.
If he's named at lock, he'll play lock. In that trial game, he was named at lock, started at lock, went off for a while, came back at lock. Like there wasn't much to me that indicated that he wouldn't be their lock. So if he's named at lock, I'll trust that. And if it blows up in my face and he moves to the edge, so if Kolomatangi goes to lock, he goes to edge, it's not really a downgrade. That's
No, I
fine
think
as
it's
well.
almost an upgrade. Like I think he's
Yeah.
actually a very good buy on the edge. I think there's
Yeah.
question marks at lock with upside. I think at edge is like if he was named at edge, I think I'm going to get him. So agree with that. Speaking of edges, love the combination of Hosking and Crichton, two potty type players. You haven't gone for the guys like Kelma or Finifuaki or Wong. You've gone heavy up front. The Crichton, look, we've talked about in the past, he's kind of always average in the 60s. I know the Roosters are expected to be worse this year, but I think Roosters will still be decent, fighting for the 8. And, maybe being in a worse attacking side mean Angus gets more stats just because they're more reliant on him. Hosking is an interesting one. Look, I think he's shown that he's got great scoring pedigree when getting 80 minutes. I want to pose this question to you, though. Obviously, Matty Nicholson didn't make the squad. Won't talk too much about him, but other than the fact that, look, I think his conditioning, they made it pretty clear that he was a project. So not that surprising he's missed the squad. A little bit surprising, but not that too bad. But Simi Sasagi on the bench, edge forward. My question to you is, Elliot Whitehead last year, when Sasagi's on the bench towards the last 5 to 10 games of the season. 50 minutes for Whitehead splitting with Sasagi, 30 minutes. Hosking just coming off the calf strain, race the clock, is just in time to be ready for round one. Are you not worried he plays 50 minutes for 30 points at 600K?
Yep. It's a fair question. And again, my grip on Hosking is not that tight either. So he's vice captain because he plays the first game of the round. It's not an indicator of how I view him as a fantasy prospect for this year. I think at 582K, the worst case scenario is injury and we're screwed around with that, right? But in terms of him not being injured and actually playing footy, the worst case scenario is that he is what he's priced at. And then a couple of injuries happen elsewhere and he pops off for big minutes and he bumps up some scores then, right? So that's kind of the worst case at 582K. If he was sort of 650K or something like that, we'd be looking at a different thing. But at that price point, he is pretty safe. The upside is that he averages 65 points. So I play fantasy probably a bit different to a lot of people, but I sort of play to win the whole thing. And if there's an upside play like that is there that you can pull out a 90-point game in a given week, I don't want to not have that guy, right? So that's where I'm sort of looking at the pod there with Hosking and willing to take that risk. But he could absolutely blow up in our face. And that's why I'm not saying to anyone you have to have Hosking, because there is a big chunk of risk that's attached to him too. Gussie Crichton, by the way, I just want to shout this out. In the trial game, they were getting blasted, but he had a few runs where he sort of ran to the line, bounced off, turned, fended a guy, threw an offload out the back. He was sort of going sideways, especially as they got worse. Love to see it. All the signs.
Love seeing that. Crichton. And his score in the preseason game versus the Knights wasn't great, but you can tell they weren't putting in great effort. Like I think for Saifidi's try, he had a very bad arm grab, like where Saifidi spun out of the tackle and then he tried to tackle James Schiller where he just bounced off. I just think he was running at half speed, just get, air in the lungs. I wouldn't worry about his score. I think Angus is a great option in a pretty, I'd say edge and fullback this year are definitely the hardest positions. So love the selections there. I think look, with Hosking, you've made a punt with high upside and limited downside. Worst case, like you said, he scores what he's priced at. So definitely on board with that, especially given that edge doesn't have a lot of great spots. Like if you pivoted away to other players, they have just as much downside or potential variation as Hosking. Like if you pivoted to a Kelma Tulangi who misses 10 tackles week one, gets dropped for a Sean Lane or Madison, or if you went to a Finafuaki, gets 60 minutes, or if you went to a Suo Wong
John
who
Bateman
plays 40 minutes. Yeah, Jen Bite.
He was in that spot. He was in that spot until that team list. I love Papali. So, I don't like the bench, right?
You've gone for the guy that has the highest weekly scoring potential out of those kind of players, like versus guys like Gilbert, who might be a 45 guy. Whereas Hosking came out last year with a bang. He scored like 93 against Para in round 2 the year before. He can do it. And even if he gets 50, 60 minutes, he can still bust out a 70-plus score, just given his attacking potential. So, look, I'm on board with that. I think Cleary and Metcalf are pretty easy to talk through. I think they're very common. Same with Bird and Lucas. Yongi, Jaden Campbell, Marzu, I think they're pretty common picks too. I think Jaden Campbell's not as common, but I can understand the logic that
Marzu is 4% as well.
Yeah, Marzu is honestly, I think the function of Marzu being 4% though is because a lot of people are on Ponga, and it doesn't make sense to have both, given that they have an early buy. I think if the Knights had a buy in round 10 per se, I would see a lot more Marzu combination. But look, I'll talk through Marzu again. Priced at 36, historically kind of been a mid-40s guy at the wing. Looked great in preseason. Like you said, left edge is going to be money this year for the Knights if all goes well. Jaden Campbell, 54 average last year, now gets a lot more kick meter potential. Titans should go one step better. It's kind of funny. Everyone's kind of on the Titans this week, despite getting drubbed by 50 the week before, but everyone was falling off the Titans. So a week in rugby league is a lot. So
I wish they didn't have that, because I had Campbell before that game. I was set on him, but people are jumping on. It's a tough choice, though. It's not cut and dry. So I have Campbell there. It doesn't mean that I'm saying he's the best wing fullback. Like, it's hard for me not to sort of look at this team and go, maybe I go Ponga and Brimson instead of Campbell and Marzu, right? And just switch around my Titans and Knights. Like, they're just as good. What do you do there? That's the tough part. So I don't know. Like, I think Campbell's the guy, but you could make a case for Ponga, Turbo. You could make a case for Reece Walsh. You could make a strange case for Gutho. Like, there's a bunch of guys that you could really argue in that wing fullback spot. I just like the guy who goal kicks and does a lot of general play kicking with the attacking upside in an improved Titans side. So that's my call, but I'm not saying everyone has to jump on that one.
Yeah, I think I've experimented with pretty much every wing fullback. But moving on to your side, I think look, your bench makes sense. Hetherington's probably the one with the most discussion. Like I think we're skipping through for a bit. Mamazala's obviously very common. Duffy must have. Sandon Smith must have. Cole must have. Tamale we've discussed in other videos, but highest run meters, highest post contact meters, most line breaks, most tackle busts. I think he had a game where he had 16 tackle busts and 300 odd meters against the ladder topping North Sydney Bears last year.
Do that round monumental,
monumental upside. Only question mark is it Tamale's spot or is it Albert Hopewaide's spot? Have to make a call quickly since they're playing in Vegas. But I think Toa must have and Katoga, 35 and 49 points playing for Fiji last year. Reportedly training on the edge for Parramatta, named to start on the edge. Both their trials didn't play week 2, got pulled late. I think undisclosed injury. I think if he gets named at secondary, you have to have him. But talk to me about Kobe Hetherington because he's had the lock role before and been very uninspiring. Does he take the leap under Madge, or do you think him? Previously at lock, he's kind of played 45, 50 minutes. Are you seeing that now being a 70-minute lock position?
It's not locked in for me, pun intended. So him, Kobe Hetherington, Talis Duncan, Sua Wong, Aaron Clark, like there's a bunch of guys in this box who, even Kelma Tuolangi, you can make a case for. And today I like Duncan and Hetherington. That could change right on round 1. Like that, I'll be looking at that every day for the next 2 weeks, just thinking about whether I want to do this. So Hetherington, the thing I liked about him was in that trial game, the 37 tackles, 0 misses, really nice clean stat line, had a good role in that game. And the fact that they're moving Pat Carrigan to prop for him indicates to me that they are very serious about him as the lock. Madge Maguire, he doesn't mind having a lock who isn't as destructive or creative, but just gets the job done, makes his tackles, makes his meters, but doesn't jump off the page. And that's who Offa Hengawi was at the Tigers when he averaged 55 points under Madge. And that's who Hetherington's going to be this year. I'm not forecasting a 55 average, but at 414K, if it's a 40 average, a 45 average, something like that, that's absolutely fine for me. So I just think the upside there is really strong and the risk is not major unless he plays terrible footy. But the Broncos are looking like they're going to start hot, and that'll mean that Hetherington will look good in his role. So I think you'll hold the spot. The other part is, I guess I'm questionable on, like Sua Wong. I've had him a bit this preseason. Just don't love this Roosters rotation mess. So him and Nafahu White, I just can't bring myself to own those guys. I'd rather jump on Watson, Crichton, who I know the roles of in this Roosters pack.
Yeah, and speaking of Wong and White, they seem to be in a bit of a timeshare watching the Knights game. Is that when Leniu came off, Butcher came off the bench, played at prop, and then Wong and White kind of swapped after the 20
points.
Love
Black
that.
hole
And then,
points, mate.
honestly, and then 20 minutes into the game, Wong got subbed for White, and they just kind of had an awkward share. So, yeah, look, I'm going to now talk. I mean, we've discussed the players. I want to now walk you through some notable omissions for like highly selected players, very popular players, and tell me your logic for avoiding them. Kalen Ponga, you kind of already touched on. It's a flip between, Campbell and Marzu and Ponga. Sorry, Campbell and Marzu versus like Ponga and AJ Brimson, for example. So I won't touch on that, but talk us through skipping Isaiah Yeo, highly owned, 30%. You're not worried he comes out with a 70 plus in a smaller field in Vegas, meaning more work up the middle. You're not worried you're going to be behind the 8 ball with Yeo.
Yeo is what you're paying. Like you pay for what you get with Isaiah Yeo. So I never really get FOMO for not owning Isaiah Yeo because you pay such a big price for him that he should be doing that. He's super reliable. So if my goal this year was to have a safe, solid rank and try to finish in the top 1,000 or top 500 or, something like that where I'm not really going for that sort of top spot, then I would grab Isaiah Yeo 100%. So if you're in a head-to-head league, he's probably a solid option there too, right? He's a guy who, because head-to-head, you're trying to beat 16 guys. You're not trying to beat 200,000 people. But if you're trying to go for that top spot, and this is how, it blows up in my face a lot. It worked once. It blows up in my face a bunch. But I think you have to go against guys like that because he presents no value. And if I'm not going to captain him, then I'm not that interested. If Cleary went down injured or was unavailable for some reason, then I'd definitely target Isaiah Yeo as my reliable captain. But without that sort of circumstance, Cleary is my captain. Cleary has 10 points more upside than Isaiah Yeo does. Like he's at the same price, but he is a 75-point player in my head, and Yeo's a 65-point player. So they're not the same guy. Cleary over Yeo is a really easy choice. And then not having Yeo, it allows me to do a few things. So I can get Harry Grant, who has averaged 65 in the past, right? Harry Grant could easily come out this year and match Yeo or be
Yep.
close to Yeo. Everyone's
Yep.
very obsessed with last year, but the like 3 or 4 years prior, Harry Grant was averaging between 60 and 66.
Yep.
So he's just as capable. And Yeo, by the way, was below 60 average before the last 2 seasons. So he's had a great run, but he doesn't have Fisher Harris there as well. Does that destabilize their defensive line? Does he have to do more work in terms of sort of rushing out, bringing that intensity to the defensive line, which is something that does not reward you with fantasy points because you miss tackles and you use a lot of motor sort of sprinting out of the line and making big contacts. So I've got a few questions here for Yeo. I don't think he's going to drop off much, but I think he drops down a couple of points from what he's priced at. And even if he was exactly what he's priced at, I'm not buying guys who are what they are priced at. I'm only buying for upside.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. Like, if he comes out week 1, he scores 70, it's only 5 more than what he's priced at. So you're not losing sleep over it. So, and if you're not planning to captain him, then he's safe. Like, for example, he's in my team, so I see the appeal. But I also very much agree with your comments, and it's got me thinking maybe I should reinvest that money into high end guys with upside, like guys like Hopgood who are guns, but kind of on a 5-point discount. So you could, wherever you can squeeze some value, I think it's great. So that's, speaking of value, like a couple of notable omissions, and we'll run through quick. This video is going for a long time. I mean, I'm sure people
love it.
love hearing, love hearing about your team thoughts, especially because this is your actual team. I'm just going to walk through a couple of notable cash cow omissions. Royce Hunt, I think, is an easy one, but walk us through why you're skipping Jackson Purdue. He's almost 30% owned.
Yeah, Purdue's interesting. He is not a big base fantasy scorer. So he's a smaller guy, traditionally a half and fullback. He's running at center there, but I like my centers to be big bulldozing ball runners. So I've got a couple of forwards in my starting center spots. Then I have Rob Toya, Tamale, Kautonga. So Toya and Tamale are both absolute monsters with the ball in hand. And Kautonga is probably a back rower. So I'm not looking for those sort of cute centers if I can avoid them. To be honest, even Stafford Toa is probably ahead of Purdue for me too. So look, Purdue, he's fine. I can see a world where he pumps up some big scores and scores some tries. He's a great player in real life, but he can't have an average game and score well in fantasy. And that's what I want. I want guys who can kind of play a bit average and still score well in fantasy. Back to Hetherington, that's kind of why I like him because he can just plod along, probably pump out a 50 and you don't notice him. That's what I want from my boys. So yeah, Purdue, I'm not hating it. I'm not saying sell him, but he's just not my kind of cash cow.
And speaking of Hetherington and just kind of accumulating, Tom Gilbert, very highly owned, a lot of discussion on him. Neither of us are going close to him. So, walk us through why you don't want to borrow it.
Didn't like him in the trial game. Didn't like Max Plath on the edge either. So they named Plath on the edge, Gilbert at lock. Gilbert didn't play bulk minutes or produce bulk stats. That's not really what I'm worried about, though. He didn't really jump off the screen in that game. It didn't look like that dominant Origin player coming back from 2 major injuries. I kind of needed him to look good in that game for me to think, yeah, this is the same guy. He'll be fine from round 1. I've come out of that thinking maybe it'll take a bit of time to warm up. The other thing is Max Plath had 8 missed tackles playing on the edge. So I don't think they're going to run him on the edge a lot. I think they were planning that and they saw how it went, and they're probably going to bring him back into the middle rotation too. So that's my worry there. If JMK got hurt or something, Max Plath went back to hooker, I'd probably be looking at Gilbert at that point. But at this stage, there's too many mouths to feed in that forward pack, and Gilbert just doesn't have the upside to justify that risk. Because even with the big minutes, he averages about 47.5. So the ceiling isn't there to justify the gamble.
And last couple of names, quick one. A lot of people on him. Kelma Tuolangi, Parramatta boy, and you're not going with Kelma. Why are you avoiding him?
I had Kelma until I watched the trial game, week 2. He got cooked. He had 7 missed tackles and 8 meters run. So it's a stat line that I wouldn't want to see in my team. It's risky because he was always hard for me to own. Because I like Kelma as a player, right? I'm a fan of him, but if I was picking the team, he wouldn't be in the starting team, and he may not be in the 17 at all. So it's very hard for me to pick a guy who doesn't pass the eye test in my mind, which is where I find it very difficult to jump on someone like him. That has burned me in the past. So sometimes I'm completely wrong and the coaches see things I don't see, and that's fine. But I just can't bring myself to do it. If he's named in the starting side round one, it becomes a question of, do I like Hetherington or Kelmer? Hetherington has the better job security. He's in the middle. He's got a better PPM historically as well. I'm probably going that way. Tallis Duncan versus Kelmer. Like, he's in that group there with Suo Wong, all those guys as well. And I've chosen Hetherington and Duncan out of those two, but I wouldn't hate having Kelmer if I needed to.
And very last question. You were high on him all summer, all preseason. Yep. Cameron Munster didn't make your final cut.
He made space for Zach Hosking. So when I removed Kelmer to Olangi, I needed to bring a second rower in. I removed Kelmer, brought in Hetherington with that spot. So he was a straight swap there. And then I was all right, I need a second rower here. And I removed Munster because I was adding Cole in at base price. So I got another half there, and I was all right, I probably can't carry Munster. I'll go for Zach Hosking. Now, Munster and Hosking, to me, they're quite similar in terms of their fantasy profile. Munster has that 60-plus average upside. He's priced about the same. He has injury risks just like Hosking does. So I felt like I was getting an equivalent upside play there while addressing a positional need. But if I could find a way to get Munster back in, it's hard. It's hard to do because I've got Duffy, Sandon Smith, and Jack Cole all on the bench there. And I'm not getting rid of them. I'm not getting rid of Metcalf. I'm not getting rid of Cleary. Here's what I will say. If Cleary wasn't playing round one, I would go get Isaiah Yeo at the middle forward spot, and I'd make Munster my anchor at the half spot. But outside of that circumstance, I just can't fit him in with too many halves. But I do like him. I like Luai too.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Munster barely got any kick meters on the weekend. I, still think they're playing it safe with his groin. I'll be avoiding him regardless. But, there's so many half options this year. You couldn't go there. So, Longy, thanks again for doing such a detailed analysis on your team. I'm sure it's safe to say that you're expecting a lot of changes over the next week. But are you fairly confident with your Vegas players? And, do you think if you had to change any of the Vegas players, who's most under threat, or are you kind of locking it in?
I may consider moving Hosking for Corey Horsburgh. I'll think about that more deeply over the coming days. Horsburgh named in the starting prop spot. It's a bench that won't steal a lot of minutes off the middle forwards. If Horsburgh plays 55 minutes or 60 minutes, he'll average 50 to 55 points, right? And at 550K, it's a lot safer than Hosking. So I could consider doing that. If news comes out that Duncan maybe is gone as well, then I might move Duncan out of the team, move Hosking out of the team, bring Horsburgh in, maybe bring Kelmer in, someone like that. And then I'll have a bit of money to spend, and I can maybe upgrade elsewhere to sort of get a bigger player in a different position. So that's one thing I'm looking at. But look, Tamale, I'm pretty set on. Cole, I'm pretty set on. And Cleary as captain, I'm definitely set on. Metcalf, can't not have Metcalf. So yeah, pretty locked in, man.
Well, that's exciting. All the best for this year, Longy. I know we'll do another full team reveal before, I guess, round 1B after Vegas. Looking very forward to that. But look, you've put together another great team this year. Loving some of the more unique twists to your team. And look, you might come second to my team this year, eh?
Oh, looking forward to your team reveal next, man. But look, cheers for the questions. And thanks, everyone, for jumping on. We'll jump over to Biz's team next. See you guys there.